Some children are praised for being so mature. They don't cry loudly. They don't ask for much. They understand adult problems too early. They help more than they play. From the outside, they look impressive, calm, responsible, dependable. Adults admire them. Teachers love them. Relatives call them wise beyond their years. But psychology teaches us something important. When a child seems unusually mature, we must gently ask, what did they have to give up in order to become that way? Because childhood is not meant to be managed. It is meant to be lived. Childhood is when the brain learns safety, the body learns relaxation, and the heart learns that someone else will handle the hard parts. When that stage is interrupted, children adapt, and those adaptations often follow them for life. So let's walk through the long-term psychological effects that can develop when a child was never truly allowed to just be a child. First, many of these children grow into adults who feel responsible for everything. When a child grows up in an environment where adults are overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, or unstable, the child's nervous system goes into a quiet state of alertness. They begin scanning the environment, not for play or discovery, but for problems. They learn to notice tension before anyone else does. They step in early. They try to fix things before they fall apart. Over time, the brain wires responsibility to survival. As adults, this can show up as chronic over-responsibility. They feel uneasy when others are upset. They take on tasks that aren't theirs. They feel guilty resting while others are struggling. Even in safe environments, their body still feels like it's on duty. This is not simply a personality trait. It is a nervous system that never got permission to stand down. The second effect often appears more quietly: difficulty recognizing personal needs. In healthy development, children are encouraged to notice their feelings. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you sad? But when a child's focus is constantly on others, self-awareness doesn't get practiced. Their emotional attention is directed outward, not inward. As adults, they may struggle with questions like, what do I actually want? Why am I so tired? Why do I feel disconnected? They may be excellent at understanding others but feel like strangers to themselves. Psychologically, this happens because emotional development requires mirroring. Adults noticing, naming, and responding to a child's feelings. Without that, internal awareness remains underdeveloped. The result is often people-pleasing, indecision, and a vague sense of emptiness that's hard to explain. Another long-term impact involves discomfort with depending on others. Children are biologically wired to depend on caregivers. Healthy dependence teaches the brain that support is safe and reliable. But when caregivers are stressed, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable, a child may learn that expressing need makes things worse. So they stop asking. They become self-reliant far too early. This early emotional independence often looks like strength, but it can turn into difficulty with intimacy later in life. As adults, they may avoid asking for help, feel uncomfortable receiving care, struggle to open up emotionally, feel safer being the strong one. Underneath is often an unconscious belief: if I need too much, I'll be a burden. This belief can keep them from forming deeply supportive relationships, even when safe people are available. This brings us to another major pattern: perfectionism and burnout. When a child receives praise mainly for being helpful, capable, or good, their sense of worth becomes linked to performance. Love feels conditional, even if no one says it directly. As adults, this can grow into perfectionism. Not the healthy kind driven by passion, but the anxious kind driven by fear. They may push themselves relentlessly, struggle to relax, and feel like failures even when succeeding. Achievements bring temporary relief, but not lasting peace. Psychologically, this is tied to a core belief formed in childhood: I am valued for what I do, not for who I am. Over time, living this way exhausts the nervous system. Burnout, anxiety, and even physical symptoms can develop when the body has been in survival mode for too long. There is also an emotional effect that often surprises people later in life. Children who had to stay strong rarely had space to fully feel fear, sadness, or anger. Those emotions didn't disappear, they were simply pushed aside. But emotions that are not processed don't vanish. They remain stored in the body and subconscious mind. Years later, this can look like sudden waves of sadness, anxiety that seems to come from nowhere, feeling emotionally numb, overreacting to small triggers. These reactions are often the nervous system finally trying to process emotions that were too overwhelming during childhood. In therapy, this is sometimes described as delayed emotional processing. Relationships are another area where childhood patterns quietly repeat. If love in childhood was connected to being needed, adulthood can become a cycle of overgiving. They may feel drawn to partners who are emotionally immature, struggling, or in need of rescue. Being the helper feels familiar. It feels like purpose. It feels like love. Balanced relationships, where needs go both ways, may feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable at first. This is not a conscious choice to suffer. It is the nervous system recreating the emotional roles it learned early in life. Awareness of this pattern is a powerful first step toward change. All of these patterns can lead to a deeper identity struggle. When a child's role was to manage others' emotions, there was little room left for self-discovery. As adults, they may wonder, who am I when I'm not helping someone? What do I actually enjoy? What makes me feel alive? Without opportunities for play and exploration in childhood, identity development can feel delayed. This is why some adults begin exploring hobbies, creativity, or new interests later in life. They are reconnecting with parts of themselves that never had space to grow. Yet, it's important to recognize that strengths often grow alongside these wounds. Many adults who grew up too fast are deeply empathetic. They are emotionally perceptive, responsible, and resilient. They often become caregivers, leaders, or helpers in meaningful ways. These strengths are real and valuable. The goal of healing is not to erase these qualities, but to separate them from fear and obligation. Strength should come from choice, not from an old survival role. Healing begins by slowly learning what childhood was meant to teach. It starts with building internal safety, noticing feelings without judging them. It continues with learning boundaries, understanding that saying no protects emotional energy. It involves practicing rest and play without guilt, reminding the nervous system that joy is allowed. It includes allowing safe people to help, even when it feels uncomfortable at first. And for many, it involves inner child work, offering compassion to the younger self who carried too much, too soon. From a psychological perspective, healing is about updating the nervous system. It's about teaching the brain that the present is safer than the past. You were a child doing the best you could in an environment that asked more of you than was fair. Your mind and body adapted to survive. Your personality formed around responsibility because it had to. But survival patterns are not life sentences. The brain remains capable of change. Emotional habits can soften. New relational experiences can create new internal beliefs. It is not too late to experience care. It is not too late to learn rest. It is not too late to discover who you are beyond being the strong one. You deserved a childhood filled with protection, comfort, and space to grow slowly. And now, step by step, you can begin building a life where strength is no longer your only role, where you are also allowed to be supported, playful, vulnerable, and fully human. If you were the child who had to be strong before you were ready, the child who understood too much, too soon, the one who carried emotional weight that didn't belong to small shoulders, none of that was a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of the environment you had to survive. You were not too sensitive. You were not too dramatic. You were not born serious. You were adapting. And those adaptations helped you make it through a stage of life that asked more of you than was fair. But what helped you survive childhood does not have to control your adulthood. You are allowed to rest now. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to be cared for, supported, and understood. Healing is not about blaming the past. It's about giving yourself permission to live differently in the present. It's about learning that strength and softness can exist in the same person. That responsibility does not have to erase joy. That being dependable does not mean being emotionally alone. The child you were deserved safety, comfort, and protection. The adult you are can begin offering those things to yourself now. Gently, patiently, and without shame. because growing up too fast shaped you. But it does not have to define the rest of your life. If this message resonated with you, you're not alone. And this is exactly what we explore here on the Inner Mind Psychology. This channel is a space where we break down complex emotional experiences into clear, practical psychological understanding. We talk about childhood wounds, adult patterns, healing, relationships, and the science behind why we feel the way we feel. So if you want to understand yourself on a deeper level, if you want language for things you felt but couldn't explain, and if you're on a journey of emotional growth and self-awareness, make sure you subscribe to the Inner Mind Psychology, turn on notifications, and join this community of people who are learning, healing, and growing, one insight at a time. Your mind matters. Your story matters. And your healing is possible.